Go ahead, push buttons.
Excellent. Well, Lawrence, thank you so much for helping with my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Laurence Wynn. I run something called Spacefarers Corporation, which is an outfit that produces live action technology theater about a self-sufficient colony somewhere in space. And it has clients that include people who are running businesses and want to sell their stuff in this context, and visitors who come to be entertained and have a good time and experience a simulated space colony, and researchers who are looking for applications for their products.
Now, whenever you say live action events, are these like several hours, or is it like
They're like they're
several?
like all they're like all day. They occur around you all the time. They're site specific events, and there's a storyline to them, and you can follow the actions if you want. If you can just experience them as they're around you while you do your shopping. It's a shopping experience.
Could you kind of describe what it'd be like? I mean, uh, if we were to have like an all-day event, what would be involved in the experience you create?
Well, if you're familiar with Renaissance fairs, it has that sort of a flavor. There's stuff going on all the time, and there's all kinds of interesting things to shop for. In our case, those things are technology that are uh, either specific to what a space colony might be as the shop owner imagines it, or is sustainability technology that is on the path to space colonization. For example, technology for water, bioreactors for water purification, which would be the first stage to recycling water, uh, and air regenerators that are useful in safe rooms in houses where you need to turn off the ventilation for whatever reason. You're up in the mountains, there's a fire, you're underground, but you need air, and you haven't got time to escape. So that is an application. There are also all kinds of agricultural applications, hydroponics, aquaponics. Uh, when we open our theme park, there will be restaurants that use those things. So basically, in this area of sustainability technology and space life support, we plan to supplant even Disney in terms of entertainment value in this particular area.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I mean, what you were talking about, I was even thinking in the Southeast Texas and along the Gulf of Mexico where we have refineries, being able to have clean, recyclable air in your house when outside may not be so good. It's
or,
awesome.
or in Los Angeles.
Or in Los Angeles, yes, indeed. Um, so you mentioned theme park. Tell me more.
Okay, well, this idea is still being uh, distilled, but the idea is to have about 1,500 acres, and roughly 300 of those would be theme park in an enclosure that looks something like a crater rim, but inside has plazas and streets and so on. It has multiple levels. The idea there is that the only parking there is basically for vendors and employees. What happens is we go off site for parking in separate, like mini malls, you might call it, that basically are selling the same kind of stuff that we sell, but not with the same entertainment as in the theme park. And the transport from those parking areas to the theme park itself is via a simulator. So you get on something that looks a lot like it has a volume of a bus, but it looks like a shuttle, maybe a space shuttle kind of thing, not like a Star Trek shuttle craft. And inside it's a simulator, and as you leave the parking area, so it's gimbaled so that when you go around turns and it's actively damped, so that it feels like you look at the windows are video monitors basically. So what you see is the garage being left behind, and we lift off as we gain the street and fly through space to our destination, where we land in the same simulated fashion. So these things run like all day, and you can carry your goodies with you, and you can anything you're bringing, but back especially. Um, we plan to use robots for transportation of goods so that you're not burdened by them. We already have robots. We can use this technology that can follow you. They know who you are. They follow you around. You put stuff in them, you know, and then you have lockers. And of course, you have cargo bays on the shuttle. So the idea is to give people. It's not supposed to be. It's like a Renaissance fair. It isn't exactly authentic. It has fun elements in it. If you go to a Renaissance fair, you can see Starfleet landing parties. Those are people that show up in Starfleet uniforms. You can see Doctor Who's TARDIS. That's some of them. They show me. So it's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to inform the market and also regulators who are thinking about allowing these stuff to be introduced, water purification, for example, about them. So it has like a business function, and it also has an entertainment function. And so you can easily justify your trip to alien landscapes, which is what I intend to call this, uh, just by saying, look, I got to go look for this stuff anyway online, so I might as well go here and actually talk to people who are
And
selling that.
and if everybody gets their own personal spacesuit as part of going, it could be COVID safe.
Exactly.
Could be the only theme park that's open.
The only theme park that's open. These things are perfectly in place at alien landscapes.
I love it. Um, so you're a space enthusiast. I'm a space enthusiast. But when did you find out that we were actually planning to send people to the moon in 2024?
Well, I read Aviation Week, so it was fairly soon after it happened.
Now, most of the people I talk to, the first time they're hearing about it's from me. And I was wondering, you know, has that been consistent with your experience in terms of talking to people? And if so, what needs to happen in order for it to really become part of common knowledge?
That's a wonderful question. I got a couple of stories about that. One of them is that when I was working at Martin Marietta back in the 80s, a buddy on Space Shuttle, a buddy of mine went back home on vacation, and he came back, said he was dating this girl, and she asked, "Well, what do you do?" He said, "I work on the Space Shuttle." And he says, "Oh, does that go to the airport or something?" So yeah, the thing is that even in metropolitan areas, if you mention space, they think you're talking about legroom. So what needs to happen? This is why Alien Landscapes and Spacefarers Corporation exists. Is to is I mean the bottom line here is to get people to have fun being exposed to these ideas. I don't want it's not a lecture, it's not a science project, it's not science fiction, none of that. It's stuff that we're really doing now. We're on the path. We have the technology. We have so far we still have the resources. Although because of things that are going on, because we haven't done this, we're in trouble. I tell people, and I believe it's true, that it's the problems that you're complaining that we should be spending money on Earth instead of going into space. Those things are happening because we haven't gone into space. We haven't dispersed. We haven't created separate populations that are not as likely to be inflicted with pandemics. We haven't moved centers of industrial centers into space. We haven't moved populations into space. All kinds of things are happening to us that are very similar to what happened to experimental animals in confined. I mean, there are experiments like that. There's John B. Calhoun did a bunch of those in the 60s, and they were conflated with crowding, but what they really was about enclosure. The animals could not escape. In nature, they do. But if you're a population biologist, you equate the disappearance of an animal with its death. That's not what happens in nature. In nature, the animal leaves the specific colony where it is and goes somewhere else, joins another one, or starts one of its own. The point is that all living things disperse. Human beings used to do that, but they haven't retained the lesson. They think we need to stay on this rock forever. They think we can stay on this rock forever, and neither of those things is true.
Well, I wonder how much of it is just a believability problem. Um, I mean, even with like computers, you had like IBM CEOs in like the 60s saying we only need like, I think it's something like 10 computers worldwide, and there'll always be like these huge room things. And nobody could really imagine that you'd have like a phone with so much computational computer capability in your hand. But now that we have it, people are like, of course that's available. There's and Elon Musk likes to talk about how he feels like it'd be easier to build a rocket that actually lands on the moon than to convince NASA that would be possible. Um, you know, in terms of his company being able to develop the Starship that they're working on. And
Oh, this is Musk you're talking about.
Musk, yeah. Um, and I just wonder how much of it is just nobody's really going to grasp it until they see it happen.
Exactly. So what needs to happen is that we need an organization that makes it happen before it happens, or at least apparently. Okay, in order to see if people are well, what are we going to breathe? I run into people that say, I don't want to live on a space colony because, and they're from Tokyo. I want to live on a space colony because I don't want to live in an artificial environment. So I say, oh, really? You're in Tokyo. So do you have running water? Do you have air conditioning? Do you have electricity? How is that a natural environment?
Exactly. Yeah. Just go out into the jungle and see if that's really
People,
your cup of tea or not.
people like that, yeah. Right. So people are they need their imaginations stimulated, and this is what Disney is doing. But it's just very diverse what he does. The idea, and this is like I love Disney. I've read biographies about Disney. The thing is that he allows people to create their own adventure, but for our purposes, he allows them too much latitude. So what we have is focus. That's what Disney does not have, and it's focus for survival. We have to do this.
Yeah.
So
But we really have to figure out how to make use of the resources in space. I mean, if everything that people live in is brought up from the Earth, it it's impossible to make
of
any
course.
progress.
So anybody who talks about space colonization, like Jerry O'Neill, for example, that says no, we're not bringing things from the Earth. What we're going to do is live sustainably in space using the resources from space. In fact, we're going to build our colonies in space. His concept was basically a concept that he used at Princeton in his freshman physics class, where he says, look, okay, so is it true? What is the best place for human beings to live in space? Is it on a planet's surface? And he came up, this class came up with the answer, no, it's not. And I can give you multiple reasons why it's not. The primary one being gravity. All we really know about zero gravity is that kills you in about a year. So there's no clear way around that. So we're and if you we don't know anything about 0.16 gravity on the moon. We don't know anything about 0.38 gravity on Mars. We only know this one data point. So when it comes to going to the moon, it says, well, we should go to Mars, we should go to the moon. Mars is more fun, and it's got more stuff on it. And I say, yeah, sure, okay. But if we do that right now, we're likely to be sending 4 guys to Mars and 4 dead guys to Mars in a tin can. That's what will arrive more than likely. For multiple reasons, but one of the chief ones is that I assume, because it's the simplest thing mathematically, that there's a linear relationship between G-force and lifespan. At 0 G's is close to 0 years. One. If you're on the moon, you live to be 16. If you are on Mars, you live to be 38, which is not too bad. People used to live only that long, you know. But no, the point is we don't know. If we get to the moon and have people living there or stationed there, and begin to learn how to use in situ resources, then what's going to happen is that either we'll prosper there or we won't. If we find out that people get sick after a few years and this is really not working out, then we will have a data point that we didn't have before. If it's fine after 20 years on the moon, then we can say, well, we can go to Mars, and live there.
But also, just like the mechanics of mining and resource purification and refinement and manufacturing. I mean, these are other processes that are far more simple than life processes that we still are going to have a long learning period for. I mean, we only know how to essentially do these activities here on the earth, and they've been developed over hundreds of years.
Yep. But the physical principles are the same. There's no new physics that we need to do this. So you know, to the extent that we can, we should be developing these technologies on the Earth, and for example, undergrounding things, for example, something you need to do on any planet that lacks a strong magnetic field. And if it had one, it would probably have an atmosphere too. Those things can be done here. We ought to underground things. We ought to underground things in the mountains where there are forest fires, for example, like that. So you're not losing your shirt every time somebody lights a match. We should be learning how to make cities that are unitized structures. We already should be recycling water, because I personally know of places in the desert that are suburban, but they're running out of water, and they need to learn how to do these space colony things. And that's one of the things that we want to do with the 1,500 acres is turn that into as much as possible self-sufficient colony with that recycles water, for example, that puts out fires using the kind of technologies you would use in space, or for that matter at sea. If you want to put out a fire in an aircraft carrier, you really don't want to use too much water because you'll sink the ship. So use hypermist instead. If doing things by communications instead of by transportation, which we're learning to do because we have a pandemic. Disposing of solid waste by turning it into a universally usable source product like oil. We know how to do that too. But these are things that we should be doing, even though they're not cost effective here. They'll be necessary somewhere else, and they'll probably produce a lot of benefits even here. So the learning process needs to occur, and that's what Spacefarer wants to encourage. And that's what we'll do.
That sounds awesome. I often thought, uh, we need a way of developing and testing space colonies here on Earth first. Figuring out what's the personalities, what's the skill set, what's the kind of the setup, because it seems to me space colonies is an odd sort of very wealthy type of thing, but from a personal level, you're going to be very, very poor, because you'll probably be living right at the line of subsistence.
Sure, just if you go see Lonesome Dove and see how they live. I don't know if you know the movie or not, but
I've heard of it, but I hadn't seen it.
It's a Western. It's appalling. It really is. But what they're doing is living on the margin that's feasible with their technology. Okay, and that's what the first spacefarers will be doing as well. They're already kind of doing it. I mean, nobody wants to go to a toilet in zero gravity. I can tell you that. Even so, we have to learn how to do it, because even if people aren't living in zero gravity, they will be working there. If not, on some kind of a structure in space that they're building than maybe in even at the zero gravity center of rotation of a cylindrical colony. If they work, they're like stevedores. They work at the spaceport. They probably have we need a zero gravity toilet. We need to figure out how to do that. That'll work in one gravity too. So I mean, all of these things that need to be done but they need to have a motive. And as in anything with psychology, it animals have fun. You can tell what's fun for an animal because that's what they do as much as they can. What we need to do is make this fun, for humans. And at Spacefarers, we think we know how to do that.
So, I mean, we have two billionaires that were both passionate about space. We have Elon Musk, and we have Jeff Bezos. And they have very different visions on kind of like that future in space.
They do. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think ultimately, like the Jeff Bezos vision is probably right in the long term.
That's what I think. Well, yeah.
But I almost feel like you need the Elon vision to be able to create that short-term driver that causes for the investment and technology buildup that allows for Jeff's vision to happen. And I was wondering what you thought.
Well, what I think about Elon Musk is that he started out with the idea he wanted to make a greenhouse on Mars, and then he found out, well, there's no way to get it there. He's working on that piece, and simultaneously he's working on other pieces that seem to be unrelated, but really they are. He's working on electric cars. Well, what kind of car do you think you're going to have on Mars, right? Or on the moon? We had one on the moon, or for that matter, on a space colony, free floater that's 20 miles long and 4 miles in diameter. How are you going to get around? It's not going to be with internal combustion. I can tell you that. Okay, so there's Tesla. Okay, and his battery thing, another important piece. Even the Boring Company. What do we have to do on Mars? Get underground, right? Okay, so that's all these things fit together. And Musk, by the way, is said to be building a community around a spaceport in, was it Boca Chica in Texas? I mean, there's speculation. He's not saying, but I have a feeling that he has an inkling that we have. In fact, he has said that in order to support what he plans to do, there needs to be an explosion of entrepreneurship to do the He's not going to do all the things. He's not going to do everything. There needs to be a basis for how you live, and exactly what you're suggesting. How you live, how you do mining, how all those things are essential. Additive manufacturing is a big piece of this, as is mining asteroids, and people have considered that in books and papers for a long time. Well, it's time to get hardware. So that's what I look at. So I agree with you that the kind of Elon Musk is, as much as anything else, and he's much different from Jeff Bezos, is as much as anything else a showman. He just loves these things. He loves to put on a show, and I think that's great. I don't know what it's like to work with, but it's probably hell. He probably stays up all night. He probably insists that everybody else stay up all night. You got to work through the weekend because we got to get done. One of those guys. So I don't know if I want to work for him, but I admire what he's doing, and I want to do my part. And I think Spacefarers is it. So, but as far as, because of the gravity problem and because of other physiological things with humans, including their preferences, I think that living on a colony in space, the way Jeff Bezos would like that, he paints this picture of a bucolic setting on a space colony. Well, that's not going to be the way it is. maybe on his personal space colony it will. but the idea is correct, I think. In spite of what and Robert Zubrin has nothing good to say about that either, because he's just focused on Mars like a laser. And part of the reason for that, and he's not very overt about it, but you can see it in his writing, is that he thinks on the moon, uh, the cops are too close. What a frontier needs is autonomy, and it won't happen on the moon. It's too close. So, too bad. We got it one step at a time.
It's probably easier to learn to do sailing and boating in the Mediterranean than in the Pacific.
Yeah, I
But
would say, yeah,
one probably leads to the other.
it did. Exactly, it did. Yeah.
Um, I feel like that the 2020s are going to be to space exploration what the 1990s were to the internet. It feels like, with like the commercial resupply and, having like Cygnus and SpaceX, and you have like the commercial crew with like Boeing and SpaceX, and you have like the commercial lunar and payload services program with like these 15 um, companies all competing for 2 work orders per year. And then you have like the return to the moon, and you have like this, China really getting interested in space resources. Um, I mean, it just really feels like it's all building up to kind of like an explosion or revival or renaissance when it comes to space. And I was wondering if you felt like that was an accurate description, and it really will lead to sort of this new space age, or if you think maybe it's a little bit too premature
Mhm.
to think about that.
Okay, fair question. Uh, I think this. I think there's a real potential for that, and if I have anything to do with it, it will be realized in exactly the way you describe. On the other hand, and this is not to say it won't happen, but it won't happen the way most people think. The government is not going to do this, mostly because the government isn't capable of leading in this area. They can't even imagine what is possible. And we're talking about government bureaucrats. They can't even imagine for the most part. I mean, there's some guys at NASA who can, but who the heck listens to them? And I think that NSS, for example, makes a big mistake when it focuses on talking to bureaucrats in Washington. And by bureaucrats, I mean all the politicians. In point of fact, frontiers, which is what we're talking about, what we're really talking about here is a frontier. It's a new one. It's a place of resources without proprietors. It's a place where you can be anonymous, where only what you can do matters, not where you come from, and not what your degrees are, and none of the other bureaucratic stuff. None of that matters except what you can do. Uh, for governments, this is anathema because it's difficult to control. Our government, well, not to mention even King George had a lot of trouble with this, you know, but our government had a lot of trouble with that too. There's Benedict Arnold, for example, who tried to start a new nation in New Orleans, in Louisiana. And there's Aaron Burr and Wilkinson, who wanted to start one in the Northwest in collaboration with Spain. All of these things are a big pain and a threat to the way things are, to the status quo. And government has only one real mission, and that is to ensure the continuance of government. That's it. That's what they do. So they're my prediction is that they're not going to help with frontiers. Uh, about the only thing I like about the current administration is that Donald Trump is not a Washington insider. That is one, and it shows because he hasn't gotten these psychological limitations. He doesn't. He doesn't. He just doesn't care about the things that governments care about. And the other thing is that he doesn't know enough not to propose getting to the moon by 2024. And any other administration before him or after, I think, uh, has that inhibition. Then, if you want to make a frontier, they're going to say, "Well, yes, but we need to worry about governance issues, and we can't move too fast." So I don't say that.
I think the current NASA administrators seems like the right guy for the right time. Jim Bridenstine.
Bridenstine might be. He says a lot of things that I think are correct. And um, he might be just an example of don't forget who he's working for. Okay, he says things that he can say. There might be a lot of NASA administrators that think that. In fact, you know, I'm sure of it. But there's a limit to what they can do and what they can say because they're governed. They're governed by the guys with the purse strings. Okay, people talk about defunding the cops. At least some people do. I talk about defunding the government. It should be small. The people who go to work for government should be there temporarily. They should come from the people, and they should go back to the people when they're done doing their duty. It's like military service. And that's not the way it works out with governments because they get real comfortable. They figure out that they can get anything they want by getting together with their cronies. They learn these things, and in the past, people have been able to leave when they did that and go somewhere else. I mean, this started with Rome. It's very prominent in Roman history with the first written laws that the veterans of the Carthagena, the wars with Carthage, who were the plebeians, and the royalty there, made rules. And they said, well, but you keep changing these rules, we're leaving. And they did. They went up, or they just left. People did that in the Americas too. They just left. So that's what controls government. Nothing else does. You can have all the constitutional stuff you like. You can see people working around the Constitution as today. You can see them doing that. They say, yeah, but it's not safe. Yeah, but it's not what they meant. Well, I know what it says. I don't know what they meant. But I do know that people like Washington and Jefferson had a real appreciation for what the West meant. But what they didn't have an appreciation of is the fact that it would not last very long. In his first inaugural, Jefferson referred to the lands to the West for the thousands and thousands of generations. Well, I mean, it was about like 6 generations or something. It wasn't a bunch. But it shouldn't surprise anybody because he didn't understand compound interest either because he died broke, Jefferson. So what I'm thinking is that to rely on a government may follow, but they are not going to lead.
But it's almost like you need a certain technology to come out before you can really open up the frontier. And I think that's really, like a fairly small group of people being able to pull their resources, get transportation to the frontier, and to be able to have the equipment they need to be able to survive and ultimately thrive. Like a cover wagon and hatchet and that type of thing.
Right. Or if you're crossing oceans, a caravel. But yes, and I think that those things are already available. At least the basics are. I get that from what I read, and I read a lot. I get the impression that the technology is there, awareness of it is not, and awareness of its utility is not there either. Especially among the people who wind up having to pay for it, and that's the people who think that space is about legroom. That needs to change. People who know what you and I know are not numerous enough to do what needs to be done. And we don't need to stop talking to each other, but we do need to start talking to everybody else. We can't be high priests of technology.
Absolutely. And I think what we really have to do is get down to a container size thing. Like one of those standard containers, shipping containers, that you could put in the middle of anywhere and have like a group of like 20 people being able to live indefinitely, because it has, the water purification and the recycling and the air and
energy. Yeah. There are actually things like that, and they're marketed too, not in this country. And some of them even have legs. They're self-actuating. I see this. I don't know who the hell they're selling them to, but these are houses that can move themselves along onto land when it gets rough out and back into the water if it feels nice. So, the kind of thinking that we see applied to Earth could, a lot of it could equally apply to space, and if not, then extensions of it could. So, I mean, the thing to do is to point that out and to get people to, at Alien Landscapes, I fully expect people. I expect biomimetic robots. I expect people in costume. I expect people to come in costume the way they come to Renaissance fairs. But we have to build this imagination. This is done with, my CEO says, this is done with story. That's how you do these things. We couldn't even most people know Star Wars, they know Star Trek. They just think all of it is science fiction, but it's not entirely true. You know, so what we need to do is is bridge that gap between the science fiction that people acknowledge and the future that they do not.
Absolutely. And I see we're just past the 30 minutes. Do you have a little bit more time, or are you?
Sure, I can probably go as long as you can.
Okay. Well, don't test me. The longest interview I had was 3 hours and 30 minutes. So
Okay, so you're a pro at this.
I don't know about being a pro, but
I don't even know if my bladder will last so long.
I know mine won't. Um, let's see. So if it was safe and affordable, would you personally go to space?
I don't think I'm exactly the age where that we want in space. I think what we want is singles and reproducing couples in space. Uh, if I were in the first place, my wife does not want to go, because the older you get, the more family you evolve, and then you get to the point where, well, I want everybody to go, and they don't want to. So ultimately, I think for Earth to prosper and for this whole thing to get started, what you need in space is maybe 10,000 people, and that may be more than enough, but that's one in a million.
Hmm.
Okay, so does everybody need to go? No, not everybody can, not everybody should. But what I think can happen is that population centers, that people on the Earth, at least the ones that have that live in prosperous or at least comfortable conditions, have already stopped reproducing, essentially, because, let's face it, children are a pain, and when that becomes more widespread, the population of Earth will fall off. What I'm hoping is it's not because the death rate skyrockets, but it will do that because it can't not. Um, and in fact, I have a like a computer program. It's just Excel, but that uh, projects biological population growth. But it has, the carrying capacity. Every environment has a carrying capacity, and generally speaking, it's a fixed number. Well, when I experimented with changing that cap, because normally you get a population that rises above the carrying capacity, then falls below it and kind of hunts, and eventually winds up sitting on that number. But I don't. Technology makes the carrying capacity of the Earth not a constant. It rises when technology allows it to rise, when we have like the green revolution or something like that, and it falls when you stay around too long and you wind up with pandemics and food shortages. The whole world only has about 90 days worth of reserve. It may be less than that now, as far as food goes. So all it takes is the loss of technology, and the death rate is going to skyrocket. There is no limit to the death rate. Birth rate is a fixed number, but the death rate, there's no limit. So when I run these models, roughly 50% of the time, the population crashes to zero. Just from this effect, variation in the carrying capacity. So I am not at all encouraged by people who say that we can sustain increasing numbers of people or increasing numbers of anything on the Earth. What my expectation is that the population centers and the industrial centers will move off Earth, and that the Earth will become a solar system park, and serve for recreational and biological diversity purposes.
That's almost verbatim what Jeff Bezos says his vision is.
Well, see, I haven't heard all of his vision, but good, because I agree with that.
Yeah, he says work is for, no, space is for work and Earth is for living. That Earth would be rezoned as residential and park, and all the heavy industry would be moved off to space.
Oh, I would dispense even with residential. I think people can be perfectly happy, in fact, happier in space, just in this lunar, environment alone, the Earth Moon system. There's room, as I said, at the two stable liberation points for 5 times Earth's population.
I was just envisioning turning the outer space treaty around where no nation can claim a part of the Earth, but you can claim whatever you want to in space.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate thing.
It'd be very contentious and
Well,
just
with lawyers, you know, everything is contentious with lawyers, which is why I'm taking them right out the airlock as soon as one arrives in space.
um. Let's see. So in 500 years, where do you think humanity would have gotten with regards to space? I mean, are we still sort of here on Earth, still talking about going to space, or do you think we've actually would have had those breakthrough moments where space is a real frontier, and kind of if it is that latter, where do you think we would have gotten to?
Human beings have two possible destinies. One of them is a continuously expanding frontier. The solar system, the outer solar system, galaxies, the universe, multiverses. You just keep going. And the other one is if we do not leave, then we have to do is, if we want to model. People generally accept that rodents like rats are pretty good models for human populations, and in the grosser terms, in terms of whether they live or die and how many there are and so on, and what they do. But they make no excuses. They just do things. Human beings have excuses about religion and principles and an infinite number of excuses. That's what we're really good at. So what I think is if we do what the rats do when they're in a box, and this is a big blue box. That thing behind you in the picture is a big blue box, just spherical, and we're in it. So if we don't figure out how to get out of that box, then we're going to our population is going to follow the same general trend as happens with rats. And I look at it in terms of generations, because a rat generation is days. Human generation is 30 years or so. And my feeling is that if we decide to stay beyond a certain point, if we decide to stay here, we will not be able to leave, because that's what happens to rats. You can if you let rats go for 4 or 5 generations, they reach a point where their population is maxed out, and they fail reproductively. They can no longer parent. The skill is lost. They tend to eat their young, which they do in emergencies anyway. And human beings aren't actually that different. They do amazing things to their children. Um, so what will, especially under this circumstances similar to what the rats live under, where they can't get out of where they are, whether that's a ghetto in a city or if that's a whole planet. I don't believe it makes that much difference in terms of behavior. But what I see happening is by around 2110 or so, if we have not gotten off this planet and started our first self-sustaining colonies in space, following that, we will no longer be able to do it. We can start colonies, but we won't reproduce there. So you put 10,000 people in it, and in a few generations, it's 0 people. And I really, but the rat population doesn't die out. They just become they become senescent, and then they die off. They don't die out immediately. They just get old. And then the last one with a rat, 1,000 days is an amazing age. And that's and the experiments that have been done. This is John B. Calhoun stuff. This is about how old the last remaining rat is. And they have done experiments with moving them after a certain point in this experiment, moving the rats to a new environment, perfectly clean. There's lots and lots of nesting boxes. There are only a few of them. They're like 8 reproducing pairs, and they don't do it. They can't make nests. They don't feed their young. They just can't. We see that happening. We see that happening now. I mean, to people. Under bad circumstances, and so I would say that human beings will continue to live and well into the 24th or 25th century, but eventually there will be one remaining human being who will die of extreme old age, probably without benefit of a calendar by which to tell the date. And if I had to cite a date, I'd say about 2410, which is Star Trek territory, which is really ironic.
Well, I've you've probably heard the expression that every generation is born ignorant and completely skillless, and you have to uh, every generation has to relearn everything that they hope to be able to pass on to the next generation and to get from the previous one. Um, and so we're always, kind of in a race between um, kind of like ignorance and knowledge. And it seems to be kind of like what you're touching on is that um, there's some lessons that get lost. Like with technology, for example, technology expands the current carrying capacity. To a large degree, some of those key technological components are kind of being concentrated in very few places and very few hands. And it'd be very easy to lose some key technologies that we depend upon. And then the technology breaks and the carrying capacity is greatly reduced. It seems like that's always a risk of what we have.
It is, and it can actually be if there were a nuclear war, for example, like that, it would certainly wipe out existing technology, but also many of the people, because they would be targets that are capable of producing that technology. So in that sense, it wouldn't just be nuclear winter. It would be a loss of technology. And there are plenty of people who say, and I believe, that if we lose technology, we will not be able to get it back because all the cheap energy sources have already been farmed. So, yeah, that could end things. There are a lot of things that could end things on Earth, and I think we should be more cognizant of that.
Well, I mean, one thing that I think we have to be aware of is I feel like that the peace and prosperity of the last, 50, 60 years was really a result of World War II, the Cold War, that kind of like this people seeing how bad it could get and saying, there needs to be another way. And so that kind of forced people to work it out. But I feel like that the way kind of war has been idealized in our games and videos and how the horrors of the war have kind of faded from memory is kind of setting us up to a position where, maybe having a war isn't so bad type of thing.
Well, people have experienced war. They're just small ones. And they're pretty horrendous. So I don't really think we've lost that. I don't really think we ever lost that. What we did lose, if that's the appropriate term, is the willingness of leadership to go to war. Why? Because after the atomic bomb, they had a target painted on their back. It wasn't just a bunch of 18-year-olds they're going to send off to get slaughtered, and it was them. So I think that is what produced after World War II. I think the atomic age is what produced 50 or 60 years of peace and prosperity. But that is about to end, in part because there are minorities that have been left out that are thoroughly crazy. They're like the crazy rats uh, in Calhoun's experiments, and they also they just explode, and they completely unjust. There's no out of nowhere they attack other rats in crowds or anywhere. We see that happening with individuals. We see that happening with non-state actors, in parts of the world where nobody has a job. So, if your spouse or your kids or something need to be spending money and you don't have it, well, then you can go see your local mullah and he'll set you up. But the price is your life. So as well as the lives of a bunch of other people. So we're getting to this same point with our human population that rats get to after less than 1,000 days, and it's dangerous.
It is. Well, if we were to go and create the frontier, what is the biggest bottleneck that we should be focusing on?
Government will do whatever it can to prevent our doing that, for the same reason, the very same reason that the Tidewater aristocracy on the east coast of North America that worked very hard to keep their indentured servants from just running over the mountains and escaping. They even sent troops after them, and the troops got lost too. So governments have a natural a tendency to loathe this kind of activity where they consider it running away. Just consider. I mean, if you're a part of the national debt, they don't want you leaving because you owe you owe us for the money that we spent.
Well, I mean, it seems like government have awesome tools in terms of keeping track of its citizens, surveying, preventing freedom of movement, controlling, wealth and the ability to transfer wealth. I mean, what hope is there?
There's always some hope. Maybe a fool's hope, but there's always some. I would say that there are probably some people in government who are climbing to tremendous heights, but they have absolutely no sympathy for the government cause. And it is partly in those that I put my hope, and also in the ability to fly under the radar for certain things that motivate governments by making them afraid of their people. And I don't think it's anything as direct as looting and throwing bricks, but I think that it may be possible to influence governments in ways that they cannot prevent.
That is that's awesome. When do you think is the earliest we could see some type of frontier settlement? I mean, like most optimistic projection.
15 years from go.
Is that like, do you think we're going right now, or is?
No, not yet. For me, going is committing to building a self-sufficient colony in space to do it. And that would take, in my estimation, around $200 billion a year somebody has to spend for 15 years.
200 billion. So
billion.
3 trillion.
3 trillion, more or less.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we spent, half of that in just the first 6 months of this year.
I know. But that doesn't mean we actually have it. You're going to see that in inflation.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
The price of radishes is going to be much higher.
Yeah, radishes. Yeah.
I don't even like radishes. No. Uh, but well, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
Thinking, no, really, I don't feel talked out, but I feel unless you're priming me with questions, you won't get much further.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think the odds are of us actually landing people on the moon on 2024?
50-50.
And what would it take to increase those odds?
Well, in the first place, we need to have a president that is pushing for it. And as far as that, it's only Trump now. The other candidate is worthless. In fact, yeah, they're enemies of this cause. So I would say that the chances of our getting to the moon in 2024 are about the same as the chances of Trump being reelected.
How about SpaceX's Starship? What they're doing in Boca Chica with the 100% reusable vehicle. That would be the cheapest rocket to ever launch, but be able to carry 100 people at a time to space. Um,
I think that's what the space shuttle was originally intended to do. So I think that Elon's chances are much better than they were with the space shuttle because he doesn't have somebody cutting his budget in half all the time. um, so he can do that. I do say that there are very, very definite limits to chemical rockets and what they can do, and I would say that he's pushing them.
oh, what's our alternative that we should be really investing in?
We should be investing in nuclear propulsion. We should be turning our thoughts to using fusion for propulsion. In my estimation, and I realize that I'm likely to be alone in this almost, uh, we should have done this in the 1960s when we had access to a mode of propulsion that could provide 10,000 seconds of specific impulse in comparison with the roughly 300 you get from a chemical rocket, and lift payloads on the order of 100,000 tons, and that would be nuclear pulse. Dangerous. Even we would probably lose maybe one or two people per launch from exposure to nuclear to radiation if we did that. In my estimation, that would be worthwhile even if I were one of them, uh, because that's how desperate I think the situation actually is. But I realize that we just aren't at that point yet with the psychology of most people, and the people that know what I'm talking about are not the ones that need to be convinced.
It seems to me that uh, after Apollo or even before Apollo, there was um, kind of a lot of imagining about what could be, and it seemed that this was fairly, it at least in retrospect, it looks like it was kind of mainstream, especially whenever you see like Star Trek come out of it, and all these Trekkies and stuff. But the sense that I get now is uh, people really don't connect with a vision of us exploring in space.
That's because they're thinking in the short term. The thinking that I encounter is a survivalist thinking of I want to be the last man standing,
Hmm.
which is uh, a cause of things like hijacking all the toilet paper in the store.
Yes. Well, I got two Japanese toilets, so there.
Right. So you have the bidet.
Yes. Uh, yeah. I think the Japanese have perfected how to have a large number of people live closely together in a
I
good
think
way.
they have, and I think that maybe it makes them less restless than we are. Just I mean the people who came to this country, as settlers, are the people who were basically ejected from where they were or felt ejected from where they were because they could not adapt to this, high concentrations of people, and they had different points of view and so on. Well, different points of view are something that I value very highly, but I recognize that in Japan, for example, consensus is required to get anything done.
And we know how that goes. You don't do anything.
exactly. Yeah. So, uh, uh, in a way, among all of Earth's population, Americans are probably the least happy. And I say that even when I know that the Finns are generally regarded that way, you know. But and not coincidentally, the happiest people in the world. There's a Gallup poll about this, by the way. The happiest people in the world live in South America, and I don't think it's because of their culture. I think because it's because they regard the North as a frontier and a
Hmm.
place to go when they can't stay where they are.
They have an option.
They have an option.
If it ever gets bad enough, we can always go north.
Exactly. And that's,
Whereas, where do we go?
yeah. Well, I know where we go, and so do you.
Um, well, Lawrence, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much. I can't wait to visit your adventure. I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait to see you. Thanks for talking to me. I enjoyed it.
Well, you have a good rest of your day.
You too.